Okay, I think you're good to go.
Kendra, you're muted.
I think she might be having issues.
Okay, maybe I will just start going then. So thank you everyone for joining the role of urban forests in healthy watersheds and the impacts of EAB. And I think I need to get rid of this thumbnail. Okay, there we go. So my name is Olivia Witthun, and I'm an urban forestry coordinator for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. I work with local governments and other partners, helping them manage their urban forests by providing various resources. And I work in the east central part of the state. I put up this map so you can see the area that I'm in, as well as the counterparts that I work with in the northeast and southeast part of the state, because those areas also join the Lake Michigan shoreline area. So this is why I'm here talking to you today. This photo was taken 15 minutes after a rain event started. So I want you to look at that dry area where the rain isn't getting through that tree canopy to the ground. Studies have shown that this dry spot can last anywhere from 10 minutes up to 3 hours, just depending on the intensity of the rain, the size of the tree, and how dense the canopy is, and other factors as well. So where are you going to stand to get out of the rain? I know where I would be. So let's take a closer look at this photo, and you can see the stormwater flowing in the gutter. This flowing water picks up debris, garbage, and pollution, which ultimately ends up in our waterways. Again, notice that dry sidewalk. That's what this presentation is about, the impact and role that urban trees have in mitigating stormwater, which in turn affects the health of our watersheds. Spoiler alert, trees improve water quality. Let's take a look at that stormwater runoff. It's dirty. Here's a laundry list of things that can be carried along with it. And it's not just from roads, it's from parking lots, driveways, the roofs of buildings, and anywhere there's an impermeable surface which causes water to run off of it. So this runoff goes directly into our storm sewers and eventually makes its way into our water systems, degrading the quality of our lakes and rivers. Now, trees help mitigate stormwater. We very obviously saw that right in the first photo. And the amazing part is that trees not only mitigate stormwater, but they provide a multitude of other benefits in all of these other categories as well. And that's why I love trees so much, and I'm in the career that I'm in right now. Here's the ultimate goal, a large tree canopy. So imagine all of the benefits that those trees are providing. And think of the stormwater benefits. Picture all the dry areas underneath these trees during a rain event. So given the same rain intensity that we saw in that first slide, I doubt there would be much, if any, water flowing into the storm drain along this street. So these trees are drastically reducing the amount of rainwater runoff going into the storm sewers on this road. Trees are a natural, low-cost solution for improving water quality, and their cost is far cheaper than any engineered system. So if you think about it, a tree might cost maybe $300 to plant, maybe a few dollars every year to take care of on average over its lifespan. So I don't know how much a storm sewer system costs, but I do know that I hear the word millions when its costs are talked about. And this makes trees a vital component of a community's infrastructure. In fact, trees are the only piece of infrastructure that actually appreciate in value. Everything man-made depreciates in value. When you build systems out of steel and concrete, it's only lasting a few decades before you need to repair or replace them. And they lose value as they age. So trees are the opposite. As the trees get older, they get bigger, and the more benefits they provide, thus the more valuable they are. Now, every single tree is different. They're all different sizes with different densities of canopy, plus there's variations of what's underneath. For example, there might be a road underneath it, there might be grass, a sidewalk, a parking lot. Then there's also variations in the length and intensity of all these different rainfalls. And I'm saying this because I want you to know just how complicated this research is. So we have to do a lot of it, and we have to continue to do more. But here's what we do know. As of 2015, there have been 159 studies confirming that trees help mitigate stormwater by reducing the flow and pollutants. So let's look at some different studies and numbers, and we're going to start with an easy one here. The U.S. Forest Service reports that runoff from 1 acre of a paved parking lot generates the same amount of annual runoff as 36 acres of forest. And 1 inch of rainfall on this 1 acre of paved parking lot produces 27,000 gallons of stormwater runoff. I'll let that sink in for a bit. So here's a more complicated example with more numbers and more research to look at. So this is from 2011, and this study compared a forested watershed, which you see on your left, with an urban watershed on the right. So the forested area has about 99% canopy cover, whereas the urban area is 56% open space. The impervious surface difference is 1% in the forest and 44% impervious surface in that urban area. So I want to introduce a few vocabulary words here. There's something called peak flow rate, and this is the maximum amount of water flow during a storm event, or essentially how fast is that water flowing. So the stormwater in this urban area flows 13 times faster than in the forested area. That's a pretty big rush of water coming through. There's something else called storm flow volume. So this is the total amount of stormwater runoff, and it's 11 times greater in the urban area. So trees in the forested areas are drastically reducing the amount of stormwater runoff. Then we also have something called evapotranspiration. So this is the amount of water that's taken up by the trees and the other plants and evaporated into the air. Now, that evapotranspiration is 25% less in the urban area because there just aren't as many trees and other plants there that are transpiring. So what do we know? What can trees do for us? So there's 5 basic ways that urban trees impact rainfall and stormwater. So here we have the water cycle beginning to happen in the urban forest. And at first, the tree retains and holds on to the rainwater. So this water never makes it to the ground, so it doesn't ever contribute to runoff. Stem flow is where the canopy gets filled up and then the water begins to make its way down the branches and the trunk, and then it slowly percolates into the soil. Now, if it keeps raining, the canopy gets filled up and the water just starts to flow right through the branches and the canopy directly to the ground and falls through the tree. Then it infiltrates the soil and the ground. And once it's in there, the plants and other vegetation take it up through that transpiration process we just heard about. Now, a few things to note here. The less impervious surface, the better. We've seen that. The more canopy that's overhanging those impervious surfaces, the better. The denser the tree canopy, the better. And the more soil we have, the better. So let's dig into each one of these things a little bit more. So on average, trees retain about 20% of the rainfall. So that's pretty huge. So if we think about this, let's think about a 1 acre lot in the city, which is about 4 houses in their yards. So let's pretend that there's several large trees there, enough to provide about 25% canopy cover over these 4 houses and yards. So question for you, how many gallons of rainwater will these trees retain when it first starts to rain? About 500 to 1,000 gallons. And again, the amount of rainfall retained by this tree canopy depends on different factors. Larger trees and denser trees have more leaf area, which means more retention. And evergreens actually have more leaf area than deciduous trees. Plus, they retain that leaf area the entire year. That's why they're called evergreens. So This means that these trees retain more water during the late fall and early spring rain events when the deciduous trees don't have any leaves on them. So a couple more vocabulary words for you: dynamic and static storage. Now, trees retain a significant amount of rain on their surfaces, and most of this is just temporary storage, and the rain will eventually reach the ground. This is called dynamic storage. Some of the rain is actually retained on the leaves and stays there, and that's called static storage. A lower intensity rainfall event will result in more retention than a high intensity rain event. So I want to look at these numbers on the screen in a real life example. And we're going to use a medium-sized hackberry. So this is going to be about a 14-inch diameter at breast height, about 50 feet tall, a 35-foot crown width. That tree has a leaf area of about 7,000 square feet. So, question for you: how many gallons of rainfall can this single tree temporarily hold during a rain event? 132 gallons. All right, so this tree is actually acting as like a volume control measure. So how many gallons can this tree hold as static storage, where it just stays on the tree? 34 gallons. So we shift to stem flow, and again, this stem flow basically shunts water from the canopy along the branches and the stem where it goes to the soil at the base of the tree. It's different for different seasons, obviously leaf on, leaf off. So in the summer, about 3 to 8% of the rain goes down the stem, but you have about twice that amount going down when the leaves are off, and that makes sense. Throughfall is the rain that falls through the tree to the ground, and there is a 15 to 20% reduction in throughfall for deciduous trees. Now, evergreens retain more rain, so there's less throughfall, and so they actually reduce it by about 20 to 50%. The studies providing these numbers were actually for rural areas, which means that the urban numbers are probably higher because urban trees have a larger crown volume and more leaf area. And we know that the bigger the tree, the more capacity they have to slow this water down. Again, these trees are acting as a volume control measure. But soils actually store way more water than the trees do. They're the real workhorse in the system. But here's the really cool part. Trees actually help increase the soil's effectiveness. How? Well, urban trees are typically really compacted, so their capacity to store, delay, and filter that water is really pretty limited. And this is where the trees come in. Tree roots can penetrate that compacted soil, which increases capacity for infiltration. Now, one study showed that an average of 30 or an average of 70 to 350% better infiltration under the canopy of trees. And this study also showed an 800% increase in the infiltration for those clay loam soils. Sandy soils only increased infiltration by about 12% because they already have a lot of pore space in them. And here's the fifth one, which is transpiration. Now, this allows for more water storage in the soil. So as trees transpire, they're wicking water out of the soil, which then increases the holding capacity in the pore spaces for the next rain event. So transpiration is highly dependent on environmental factors and tree species. There were 4 different studies done looking at transpiration rates specifically for urban trees, and all had comparable results, so that's good. Now, let's use that hackberry from earlier that we were thinking about. So here's a question. How many gallons of water can that tree remove from the soil per day? That single hackberry tree can remove almost 50 to 450 gallons of water from the ground a day. Now, that number can vary, obviously, depending on environmental factors. If you get a sunny, windy day out there, that tree's really transpiring and you're going to get a high number. So the U.S. Geological Survey just wrapped up a really cool multi-year study in the city of Fond du Lac. They were analyzing the quality of stormwater in different neighborhoods, and it compared nutrients and total suspended solids from neighborhoods with trees and neighborhoods without trees. More specifically, they looked at these different neighborhoods before and after ash trees were removed due to emerald ash borer. The studies have yet to be published, but I did connect with the researcher to see if I could get a sneak peek. I don't have any numbers for you at this point, but he did say that removal of mature green ash canopy in our treatment basin resulted in small but significant increases in stormwater runoff. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the full breadth of those numbers when things get published. And this is our perfect segue to learn about the effects emerald ash borer is having on the tree canopy and thus the water quality in the Lake Michigan area. So we all know that emerald ash borer is an invasive insect that came over from Asia. And like any insect, it goes through a life cycle. You have an egg, turns into a larvae, the larvae pupate, and then you get an adult. So we always see photos of the adult EAB. It's actually a pretty beetle. It's this iridescent green with a little bit of purple underneath. But it's actually the EAB larvae, not the adults, that damage and kill the ash trees. So the larvae reside just underneath the bark of the ash trees where they feed on that cambium of the tree. And this disrupts the flow of the water and nutrients, which occur just underneath the bark, which is right where the larvae is. So you end up with these winding S-shaped feeding galleries, which eventually starve the tree and the tree dies. The green areas on this map show the cities, villages, and towns where EAB has been officially confirmed by a state agency. As you can see, there's not much along the Lake Michigan shore that hasn't been confirmed, but except for that area in Manitowoc and Kewaunee, there's a little bit there. But don't let that fool you, because it doesn't mean that EAB isn't there. We just haven't confirmed it yet. So Wisconsin has had EAB for about 13 years, so we just aren't as aggressive as we have been in the past about confirming finds. So the recommendation for, say, Manitowoc and Kewaunee County at this point is to simply manage your ash trees under the assumption that you already have EAB in them. Now, we always have to do inventories to figure out how to manage trees and figure out what the impact is going to be of a particular pest. And we use different systems in the rural and urban areas for this. So first I want to look at the numbers of ash trees in rural Wisconsin. Now here is a map from 2018, which shows where the ash are. And you can see there's a pretty heavy ash population along that Lake Michigan shore area. And if we take a closer look, we can see just how many millions of rural ash there are in each county. Manitowoc and Door County in particular have anywhere from 11 to 24 million ash left per county. Now, if you notice in the southeast part of the state, there are far fewer ash left because EAB's already gone through those areas. The ash trees there are dead, so they aren't showing up in this most recent inventory. Here's a mortality map. Basically, all the ash are dead in the gray areas, which essentially makes up that southeast part of our state. The red area shows where the ash trees are about half dead already. So those trees are in a heavily declining state. And the yellow orangish areas there are where the ash are thinning and are in the process of dying from EAB. So let's take a look at urban ash trees now. And we're going to use something called the Wisconsin Community Tree Map to get our numbers. And by the way, this is open source, available for you all on the web as well. You can use your favorite search engine, type in Wisconsin Community Tree Map, and it'll bring you right there. So what you can see then, you can zoom in, if your community has an inventory in here, you can zoom in and look at the tree right in front of your house and see the numbers that are there for it, what kind of tree it is. But this community tree map contains public tree inventory information for about the last 5 years. So it doesn't include all of the Wisconsin communities, and it does not include all of their trees. Again, these are public trees, which are like your street trees and your park trees. So I say that to you because I want you to keep in mind the numbers that we're going to look at in the next few slides are low estimates. So keep that in mind. Now, let's think about the average cost to remove and replace a 15-inch ash tree. So removal might cost about $600, stump grinding $100, replanting $300. So total cost to remove and replace it, about $1,000. And this is the cost for a municipality. If you are a private person, it's probably going to cost a little bit more for you. I'll also say that treatment is an option, but you do need to reapply those chemicals every year or two, depending on the chemical used. And I don't want to get into all those cost comparisons. We don't have time here, but I will say that most communities do a combination of removing and replacing, as well as the treatment. So here's some numbers from communities along the Michigan Shore area. And I just grabbed these from the Wisconsin Community Tree Map. And so you'll see communities from Manitowoc all the way down to Kenosha. And I've got them in alphabetical order here. So I'll let you look at that slide for a second. And then we'll take a look at this next one. Again, we're just giving you some ideas of the costs. And I have one more for you here. So this is for Sheboygan County. So back in 2010, there was an inventory done of all of the trees in Sheboygan County. So these are the numbers of ash trees from the cities and villages in Sheboygan County. I'll give you a second to look at that as well. So the cost to remove and replace all of those communities' ash trees, which is about 50,000, is just over 500 or 50 million. And remember, this is a conservative estimate. It doesn't include all the communities along that Lake Michigan shoreline area, nor does it include all of the trees. Again, it's only public ash trees, so the parks and the streets. Now, the cost to communities to remove and replace their ash trees far exceeds their yearly budgets. So these costs are on top of what they're already doing. And it's very difficult for communities to get any sort of increases in their yearly budgets. So what are they supposed to do? Communities just can't stop their regular tree program to deal with ash. They need to be properly managed. That's how you increase the benefits trees provide, and it's how you keep them from becoming hazardous. So this would be an incomplete message if I didn't also include benefits information. So at the beginning, I briefly mentioned about all these different benefits that trees provide. Well, we can actually determine the economic value associated with a lot of those benefits. So just the ash trees that I had on those 3 slides there that we've been talking about, those provide over $7.5 million in benefits a year. So if you would take those trees out, you're losing $7.5 million in benefits a year. So I am going to leave things here with that cliffhanger and turn it over to Kendra now, who's going to talk about the project that she's been partnering on to help mitigate the impact EAB is having in Sheboygan County. And then after that, we should have time for some questions. So Kendra?
So Kendra was having some issues. She did just hop on. I'm not sure. Kendra, are you available? I'm still muted. She's having internet problems.
Okay, and while she's figuring, oops, is that Kendra?
No, no.
Okay,
Oh.
while she's figuring that out, I'm going to share my screen and just pull up her. Let's see here. I'm going to pull up her presentation, but I need to do that when I'm not sharing, apparently.
I was going to say I do have access to the Q&A. So if people have questions, we could just do that now. And
that would be great. Sure.
Otherwise, I am here via audio. So Olivia, if you are able to share your screen, if you can hear me, then
I can hear you.
This way.
And let me put up my screen and then we can go from there and then we'll take questions after that. So we are on the first slide here. Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your patience. And Olivia, that was really incredible. So we know that trees are incredibly valuable to the health of our watersheds and provide great benefits to our communities. We also know that we're losing a significant percentage of our trees to the emerald ash borer, and that our communities do not have the resources needed to safely remove and replace these trees. So this work requires urgent and creative mobilization of resources. Next slide, please. So our solution to this problem that we face here in the Sheboygan area is roots, or restoration of our Trees Sheboygan. So this is an initiative that was formed as a partnership between the Sheboygan Rotary Club and Lakeshore Natural Resource Partnership, where I am the Director of Programming. And our goal with this initiative is to mitigate the impact of the emerald ash borer in Sheboygan County through public-private collaboration. Next slide, please. So Roots, again, it's a joint initiative to build a broad-based, multi-community, public-private sector collaboration to proactively address the EAB threat to Sheboygan County's rich forestry resources. And how this initially began was in 2018, the Rotary International president issued a tree planting challenge. And the challenge was a tree planted for every Rotarian across the entire world. So in Sheboygan, what this looked like was participation in the City of Sheboygan Arbor Day, which also happened to be the 40-year celebration of Tree City USA in the City of Sheboygan. So this led to one of the Rotary members, Tony Fessler, really began to understand the gravity of this situation and the challenges that municipalities are facing. And he began looking around and he found that there was a similar model in Oshkosh called Taking Root that involved this vision of public and private working together to form solutions. Now that model was not specifically addressing the loss of emerald ash borer. It was more just to green spaces in the city, but it proved to be an effective model that we've implemented in the Roots initiative. Next slide, please. These are some pictures from that particular Arbor Day that kind of started it all. And you can see the Mayor Vandersteen, the mayor of City of Sheboygan, and several Rotarians there celebrating and planting trees. Next slide, please. So the next thing that happened is this partnership formed, and that has proved to be a really valuable partnership. In 2018, that very same year that this vision was created, we partnered, began with outreach and education, building a community investment fund, and applied for funding through the WDNR Urban Forestry Grant Program. This really unique model of Roots allows us to leverage multiple funding sources, boosting local resources, and stretching the value of each dollar provided by generous local donors, while also bringing in state and federal dollars for a greater collective impact and investment in our communities. Each of these complementary projects that I'm going to tell you a little bit about contributes to a shared goal of helping our communities recover from the devastating impact of emerald ash borer. The multifaceted approach of this initiative allows us to support communities in the Sheboygan area, whether they need assistance with planning or with implementation, while also engaging residents through outreach and education. Next slide, please. So the Roots Community Investment Fund is this pool of resources from the community. The Sheboygan Rotary Club and Foundation has been seeking donations from private donors, corporations, and foundations to build this pool of funding and then issue awards to municipalities to implement projects on public land that they just don't have the resources for. So we issued our first awards in 2020. And the awards went to 5 different EAB mitigation projects with a total project value of over $160,000 and over 280 trees planted in 4 different communities in the Sheboygan area as a result of those projects. One benefit of this community investment fund, again, it gets back to leveraging multiple resources and that public-private collaboration. So this community investment fund has served as seed money, and we received additional funding as a match from other sources such as the Sheboygan County Stewardship Fund, City of Plymouth Utilities, Rotary District 6270, Alliant Energy Corporation, and matching contributions of labor, material, and equipment from municipalities as well. Next slide, please. Another component of the Roots initiative is the urban forestry town EAB plans. So I mentioned one of the first things we did was apply for grant funding with the DNR urban forestry program. And we were awarded funding in 2019, as well as additional funding in 2020. And this is used to conduct inventory in each of the townships across Sheboygan County. So we are in the process of getting our awesome volunteer force out there, identifying and measuring trees and mapping them. And this inventory will be used to inform customized EAB recovery plans for each township. As I mentioned, we're also doing outreach and education as a part of this project. Next slide, please. Another component of this initiative includes our work with the U.S. Forest Service EAB mitigation project. So Lakeshore Natural Resource Partnership was awarded $200,000 by the U.S. Forest Service in 2020. And we also received a second phase of funding in 2021 for this grant as well, with an initial $200,000 used to extend these efforts. The main focus here, of course, is mitigating the impact of EAB and restoring function to the Sheboygan River watershed and Lake Michigan Basin. So that involves the select ash removal and planting of over 2,000 trees. And you can see some of those project sites listed there, all on public lands, primarily county lands. And this will also be used to fund projects in townships across Sheboygan County as informed by those plans that I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. LNRP was also awarded an additional grant in the amount of $350,000 from the U.S. Forest Service for another project, which is targeted at coastal wetland infiltration. So this project does not specifically target the EAB mitigation. However, it involves planting of over 7,300 trees along key areas in the Lake Michigan coastal ecosystems. And that will significantly benefit the community from some of these benefits you see listed here and some of the things that Olivia mentioned earlier. In the photo there, you can see some students that we had from Christian High in Sheboygan that recently planted 130 trees in the Pigeon River corridor in November of 2020. Each of these key project sites are areas that local groups have invested in over the years and will continue to care for well into the future. Next slide, please. So we need your help. There are things that you can do to help on your own property, in your own community, and in your own behaviors. So of course, don't move firewood. If you're able to help us spread the word about roots, we would really appreciate getting the word out there and helping us to grow. If you're in a position to provide financial support, we would definitely appreciate that. We are always looking to build our volunteer team. And if you're not from this area, maybe consider getting engaged in tree planting or some sort of inventory collection or whatever that need is in your community. And also consider the potential for public-private collaboration in your own community. We hope that what we've developed here is a model that could be replicated in other areas. And if you are planting trees on your own property or in your community, be sure to plant diverse, native, and non-ash trees. Next slide, please. So that brings us to our question and answer session. Please, if you're interested in learning more or connecting, visit the websites you see on your screen. You can email questions or comments to the email address you see there. Or you can also contact us via the Event Mobile platform in our speakers sections. And after the event, you can find us on social media as well.
Right, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen presentation at this point. And Deidre, you said you had some questions.
Yeah, I can read those. So one is for Kendra first, while you're still here and connected, is what are different sources that you found for volunteers with that project?
You said different sources for volunteers?
Yeah.
Well, one of the really great sources has been the Wisconsin Master Naturalist Program. This is a group of individuals that are dedicated to helping out in their communities. And as a part of enrolling in that program, there is a requirement of maintaining a certain amount of hours. So that's been very valuable. We've also connected with our local United Way that has a volunteer network, and that's been a really great resource as well. You can also sign up to volunteer on the Roots website and the LNRP website. So we're really trying to pull from multiple different sources and provide a robust training opportunity and exciting chances for volunteers to get involved in the community. So it's been really a rewarding program so far.
Great, thank you. We have a couple more. One, lots of likes, just saying excellent presentation, Olivia and Kendra. Impressive and impactful community-based conservation work being done by DNR and LNRP. So that's good to hear, despite our technical issues. Another one was, I'm really interested in how the economic value associated with the benefits is determined and calculated. It would be great to use that formula and help communities determine their own loss. I think that's an Olivia question. Do you know if that's been done at all?
Yeah. It certainly is being done and has been done as well. So I know that the Fox Valley area and the Green Bay area, most of the municipalities in those two areas actually had some economic analysis happen. Gosh, it was probably like 7 years ago-ish now. And that was put out there quite a bit. So if anybody has an inventory, that information could be plugged in to have the economic benefits calculated. So there's different tools out there. The main one is iTree. So iTree is just this suite of tools that can help you find all of these different economic values and things. And if you were interested in doing something like a single tree in your yard, you could use a search engine and look for something called the National Tree Benefits Calculator, and it'll pop up those benefits for you just on that one tree that you're looking at. So there's a couple things, but iTree and the National Tree Benefits Calculator are the ones out there for that.
Great. Next question. Let's see. I imagine there are a lot of variables at play, but are there ratios of impervious to pervious surfaces or tree canopy cover percentages that urban areas can target and aid stormwater management?
Yes, so I mentioned iTree having this suite of tools, and one of the tools that they have does calculate that canopy cover. We have an assessment program at the DNR Forestry Division, and we have actually taken that and calculated the canopy cover for all of the municipalities in Wisconsin. And so all of the communities have that information, and somehow, some way you can find it online too. I'm not sure, but if you're interested in anyone specifically, let me know, and I'll get you that fact sheet that we have out here. But they do have that information and would be able to make a case for, you know, planting trees in this particular area or that particular area to specifically impact the stormwater management. We do have a few communities that have been successful using that information and actually then getting money from that stormwater fee that they collect on their taxes to use part of that money then to help fund their forestry program. So it's a great idea, and it is happening, and we'd love to see more of it.
I'm just going to jump in with a closing because we only have 1 minute left here. Olivia, thank you so much for your time and expertise. And thank you to everyone for joining us and for your patience. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation. The next session will begin after a 15-minute break. Be sure to check out exhibitors, sponsors, and networking opportunities in the meantime. After the break, tune in for the keynote presentation on charting a path for a socially regenerative agriculture that starts at 11:30. And be sure to tune in this afternoon for our presentation on showcasing the Coastal Resource Hub.
Okay. Okay, I've stopped the live stream.
Right.
That was good. All the content got through to the other end. That delay that you had at the end was just right.
Oh, good.
And everything worked out pretty well. We didn't really have any real serious issues, I guess.